All right, everyone. I am excited to introduce my next guest, comedy writer, radio producer, host of Dark Passengers, the greatest Dexter podcast in the history of Dexter podcasts. Please welcome to the show, Jack Pesin. Hey.
Hey, so good to be here. So great chatting with you, Jeff. We've been circling each other for a little while, and I'm glad we are finally sitting down together.
Well, when I got your note saying you were my biggest fan, I knew I had it. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Well,
I,
when you listen to every episode and then you get to be a guest,
well,
it's
I know.
it's
The honor is yours, sir. The oh man. All right. So you are a world-renowned podcaster of Dexter-focused Dark Passengers, which is it's not light material. It's serial killer stuff. And
true.
but before we get into your obsession with serial killers, you have you have a really cool background. So a comedy writer, you worked on the Artie Lang show. You worked with Howard Stern. I know you did. You were in the Buy It Now, the sound department.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean,
Hey,
like I
you
crushed
did
the casting director. I mean, it's like some of this. If we were to focus on the Artie Lang show and Howard Stern,
yes.
what was that peak New York experience?
So I did a number. I'm from New York originally. Now reside in Los Angeles for about 10 years. So I came up. I've wanted to work in entertainment my whole life. Did a whole bunch of New York Post, CBS News, that kind of stuff. That type of thing in New York at that time, we're talking 20 years ago plus, give or take, would lead to radio. I grew up, I will tie into Howard Stern. I was a big sports fan growing up. We had a big famous sports radio station in New York called WFAN. I'm an insomniac, so I listened to a lot of late night radio, which would then lead to Howard Stern starting very early in the morning. I will say, apart from, and look, I can make dirty jokes. I host my show with my wife. We're dirty jokers and everything. But that's not what drew me to Howard Stern. What drew me to Howard Stern was his, I will say, and I'm not sure where this stands now. I'm not as familiar with Stern as I once was, but I think he has been one of the great interviewers that I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to him interview Jeff. I think he does a great job, when he got the girls off of the machines and all of that.
Not only is he the best interviewer ever, I'm shocked that he's never had just a regular show where somebody grabbed him up. I mean, he's so good. I mean, if he's interviewing someone, and I even just listened to the entire hour and a half interview, and that's what's on now that I'm in the car again because I'll listen to the whole thing again. I mean, that's how good he is. He's definitely has earned his ranks. That's why I wish he would do more and that it would be more accessible than just on his show.
Yes. Like if he wasn't behind the paywall forever. I got a voiceover career going from working on Howard Stern. I was the assistant to the famous Scott the engineer at the Howard Stern show. Worked with Scott very closely. I spent many hours with him. Heard a lot of off-the-cuff comments about working there that it was rough for those guys. As someone just kind of coming in as a PA and VO, it wasn't too bad. I do want to say my claim to fame, my claim to fame back then, which kind of shot me up, was I got called in right after Howard married his current wife, Beth. I was brought in to basically rail against Scott for complaining about his seating assignment at the wedding. And I'm thinking geez, I like Scott. I stand next to this guy for 6 hours a day. I have to defend Scott. I could hear immediately as I'm like, he wasn't complaining too much. I see Howard's face fall and he's like, oh, and I'm like, oh no, I'm blowing it. And then out of nowhere, Artie Lang says, does this kid not have the greatest voice in the history of radio? Then from there, Howard had me do a fake Godfather 4 promo. Then that launched a beginning VO career working for Howard TV, which was, I don't know if you recall this was a pay-per-view version of Howard on video on demand. As far as I can remember, I did a bunch and I did some commercials, but I remember introducing pornographers' homes who these Howard TV was going into interviews. So it was that sort of early stuff.
You do have a great voice. You'll have to
thank you.
do a promo for me later.
I'd love to.
Jackie the Joke Man's a friend of the show. He's been on. I've talked to him 3 times.
I've worked with Jackie. I was on his show back in the day too. So we're in good company.
I met him I opened for him at a comedy show. It was one of those things where I was starting the podcast and I hate, well, he gives his business card and books to everyone. So it's not like he gave me one, and I'm like, It was one of those things where I go, well, I guess the worst he could do is not answer or say no. And he's like, yeah. And then we stayed buds. We text all the time, not all the time, but we text every now and then, or, and he's sent me stuff and like,
Oh, I love
not
that.
not as much recently, but like I think I saw his documentary before it came out.
He's a good guy.
He's a really good guy. It's so good. Like I know if I called him right now and said, I can't run this Jack episode. I need you. No, I'm just kidding.
But he could jump in if you were in a pinch.
He'd jump right in. I could get
That's fantastic.
No,
I don't want to forget to tell you this story because I'd be remiss. I had a very Howard Stern opening when I walked in. I'm just going to give you this real fast because this was like 101 things to kind of go wrong, but everything end up going right. I'm rushing in my first day at Howard Stern. And I was in my 20s. I think I was probably a little bit past college age, but I got the letter that said I could, I got in as an intern and then switched to a PA over time. As I walk in the first day, Ronnie, the limo driver, is there to welcome me very gruffly. We hadn't struck up a relationship yet. And I, of course, am carrying a coffee. I, of course, spill it all over the desk as I'm walking into on Avenue of the Americas and 48th Street into the Sirius offices. That was fine. I kind of got past that. Luckily, it didn't fall on me. I go upstairs, not late or anything, but the show, it's a well-oiled machine. It's all running quickly. George Takei's birthday was my first day. So I walk in and I can hear, oh my. I'm like, okay, this is cool. All right, this is very Stern. All right, we're really getting a crash course. And I was like, all right, I wonder what they're doing for George's birthday. And I walk in and you can see some of the studio when you walk into into the hallway. And there are approximately 17 naked men between ages 18 and 78 who were there just for George's benefit for the day. That felt very much, and I'm a professional. It's kind of like, no matter who it is, men, women, anyone in between, eyes up, you're not staring at anything. But this was sort of like I'm hearing George Takei talk about what all of these gentlemen look like. And it was a real like, hey, welcome to the Stern Show moment.
That is really funny. That is so funny. Oh man, quite the experience there. That's awesome though. I think I talked to Mitch Fatel. He said he worked there for a little bit. Somebody
I know the name.
Very funny comedian. Okay, Dexter, Dark Passengers. Let's give everyone a minute to go and subscribe and come back. Okay,
thank you.
Go back. I'll tell you what Dexter. My memory of Dexter was that if you were could afford HBO, but if you were rich, you had HBO and Showtime.
Oh, this absolutely.
Because Dexter was like the primo for Showtime.
Yep.
And I remember like for something, the thing that sticks in my head is that Showtime had to do a policy where you couldn't buy it and then cancel it because people were buying it just to watch Dexter and then canceling it till like the season came back. And so that was causing a problem, I'm guessing, for the cash flow issues for Showtime. But I remember it wasn't until later that I didn't watch Dexter full real time in the beginning. I remember that. But what got you hooked on Dexter? Like what early on, and then what made you kind of think, hey wife, let's do
a podcast.
Hey, Diana, why don't we do this? Yeah.
I'll start with the Dexter part because my wife and I have been together since we were in college. So we actually have been together since the original Dexter run started. Dexter, for people who don't know, is based on a book by Jeff Lindsay called Darkly Dreaming Dexter. It's a little bit of a series, but his first book is basically the first season of Dexter, which not giving away anything here. It's the ice truck killer season. That's what a lot of people remember. I was drawn in. I like dark stuff, especially like I'm a New Yorker who went to film school at Hunter College, so very steeped in all of that stuff. Dexter spoke to me. What jumps out to me is like a serial killer show is fun and, but it can go in so many different ways. We can have the Dahmer version, which is just super dark. I'm talking about the Evan Peters Netflix show from a couple of years ago. Really interesting, but not fun. Whereas I found the juxtaposition of Dexter being this guy who isn't evil per se, and this is a lot of discussion we have on our pod with listeners and between my wife and I. Diana is my co-host. Is Dexter an evil sociopath, or is he following the code and taking out the garbage, so to speak? There's a lot that goes into that. It was something that always just jumped out to me. My favorite movie, and this, I never know how people are going to take this because this is not a cheerful movie. And I like what I'm going to say. It's not even the original cut. It's an additional cut. My favorite movie is Apocalypse Now, the Redux edition by Francis Ford Coppola, which gets real weird and it's like 3.5 hours long. I bring that up solely because that's not a happy movie, but if you watch it, there's odd comedy beats throughout that type of thing. From what you've seen of Dexter, if I tell you I find comedy beats in Dexter, Jeff, do you know what I'm talking about at all?
Yeah, I know 100%. And just for the record, I've seen all
Enough.
of Dexter.
Okay, you've seen. Okay, gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
I did not see the one. I didn't see the first one where his son finds him. Started watching the one where he was. I call it Young Dexter. That was really good, but I think I stopped because they canceled it, and I'm like, all right. But I thought that was really good. And then I watched all of the new one, Resurrection, which I thought was really good. And I think it was a
Fantastic.
mistake to cancel
Oh, such a
last.
mistake. And look at this. You've led me directly into how I started covering Dexter. So, just to do a very quick thing. So, I had worked with someone else, not my wife, who was a former podcast partner. We did reality TV recaps. We focused on 90 Day Fiancé, just all the love and goodness to people who can watch reality TV and talk about it endlessly. I burned out really, not really fast. I did it for a couple of years, but it became a real slog for me. My co-host was burning out at the same time and didn't really want to do the show anymore. And around that time, I thought, this is late 2024. I thought, hey, I wonder if there's a scripted show we could do. So I asked my wife, hey, why don't we do a scripted show? So there's a show I don't know if you're familiar with called From on MGM Plus, starring Harold Perrineau from Oz fame and a bunch of other things. And From is sort of a Twilight Zone-based show where people are stuck in a town. Spoiler, it's filmed in Nova Scotia. So it's in eastern Canada, and people can't leave the town, and there's monsters at night, and it's a scary show. It's similar to Dexter, where we have the scary side and we have the light side. Anyway, did the first season of that with my wife, and then as that wrapped, we thought, this is fun. What else is out there? Starting a podcast, it's a lot of people start podcasts. A lot of people don't make it to episode 4, I think, is the
Yeah.
cutoff.
4 to 7, Bob.
4 to 7, right? And we were always big Dexter fans. We watched New Blood, which was the one season kind of in between the original and moving into the prequel, which was Original Sin, by the way, which aired in December 2024. That's when it started. And so about a week before, I don't know how we missed it as big Dexter people and big TV watchers, but we were like, whoa, Dexter's coming out. All right, here's a prequel. So we thought, all right, let's cover this. It'll be fun. And they did a great job with that for people who hadn't seen it. It's basically a prequel series for Dexter where you see him coming up in Miami homicide and becoming a blood spatterologist and seeing his background. It was very cool. This is an interesting thing because I mentioned without going deep into my background, I always wanted to work in TV and in entertainment. I did it in New York. I came here. I did it. I got pigeonholed into reality TV on The Voice and similar shows, and then burned out from that and ended up leaving entertainment for a few years, only to accidentally get sucked back in by starting a podcast because, very interestingly, having the first From season where we kind of got our feet wet in scripted TV, starting Original Sin, we were like, hey, let's be ourselves. Let's just talk. Let's just do our thing that we do on the couch. Not in a dirty way, just talking. After the second episode, and I just say this with just a kind of shock and awe. I don't say this braggadocious at all. After our second episode, I received an email from one of the main producers on Original Sin, and one of the main producers of Original Dexter, Robert Lloyd Lewis, who, if that name sounds familiar, he also co-created Parker Lewis Can't Lose, a TV show from back in the day. And Robert and I started a really nice, he really liked our coverage of the show, and we started chatting. Oh, and I'll be remiss here if I don't explain. I thought a really important thing, and this is a little note to anyone who wants to start a podcast covering something, I was looking for an IP that I love that was under represented in the podcast space. At the time, I think there's more now, of course, with Resurrection coming out. At the time, there was really one main Dexter podcast that was in existence, and we're friendly with that guy. And he's an English guy, and he does a solo podcast, so it's a totally different flavor than a husband and wife doing dirty jokes about the Dexter show. We saw that, and from there we realized, okay, this is fertile ground to try to walk in. Then I started getting these conversations and emails with production team, and I started getting to meet people. Being based in Los Angeles, the Dexter studios, or the offices, I should say, that were here, they've since moved to New York. Their main offices were here, and about 25 minutes away from my apartment, we had the opportunity to start meeting people. And you brought up Original Sin, which you started watching, and then that had a very cool thing. I say cool in quotes. That had a renewal and unrenewal, which I think is sort of a streaming era weird thing that happens. And by that, I don't know if you know this, it was picked up for season 2, and then in all of the merger mess of Paramount and all of that, it got unrenewed about 2 months after it was renewed. So that was a bummer. We would have had a lot of access to going to the set and everything like that. But nonetheless, we did get to go to the set before it was torn down, sadly. And then we got to meet with a lot of the creators and the important people behind Dexter.
I do remember that it was renewed. And then I think I'm guessing because Resurrection did so well, and they're like, let's just pick one, and they kind of sacrificed the other. Honestly, I would have rather had no disrespect to Michael C. Hall, but I would have liked the retelling, because I feel like they could have come at some new things versus kind of like doing the same old Dexter. But.
And we all love MCH, Michael C. Hall, but Paddy Gibson, who's an Irish actor, you wouldn't know it from watching him per se. He did such a great job in that show playing young Dexter. Would have been really fun to see where they went with that.
I really would have liked that. Well, let me ask you a question. So the books, really, of the 8 books, only the first one is kind of similar at all to Dexter. So if I went and read the series, it wouldn't be even like reading the same thing?
No, in terms of characters who come and go, that's changed up a little bit depending on who, obviously for TV, they might want to keep around. And then, of course, there's also the fact that Dexter, talk about Michael C. Hall for a second there, he brings so much to the character. His ability and, his facial acting and emotion and all of that brings so much. The character is much more sociopathic in the book, where he really has, it's one of those interesting first-person narrative books where he's talking about that he knows he's disconnected, but he can't really figure out why. Whereas they made it much more, and sorry, spoilers for season 1 of Dexter from 20 years ago, they made it much different in the series where, and this is a debate amongst fans, is he a sociopath, or did being a 2-year-old watching his mother get killed do something to his brain? And we argue this all the time. We've interviewed the creator, Clyde Phillips. I disagreed with Clyde Phillips to himself, because he says Dexter is a bit of a sociopath. He's a murderer. I don't look at it so black and white, and I find a lot of gray areas within Dexter.
It's definitely interesting, because its position is, definitely his urge and need to kill is something that he can't resist. Like somebody might need a cigarette, right?
Yes.
And except these cigarettes are people that he needs to murder. But so then his father, Harry, right, gives him a code and says, all right, we understand you need to do this. You need to have the cigarette. So use one with menthol or whatever. But like
only cools for you, Dexter.
But it can't just be anyone, Dexter. It needs to be someone who isn't good. Now, of course, that's illegal. But if he's going to do something anyway, you might as well kind of focus or hone, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, you got to do what you can with what you have, right? And we have, his father is his foster father. He finds him in this area where his mother was murdered, and Dexter doesn't necessarily know all about that. But Harry, his father, is a cop at Miami Metro, which also love the Miami setting. I just think it's perfect. Going back there, I've spent a lot of time in Florida as well. They have Florida man stories for a reason. It's an interesting place. It's a really interesting. It's a cool story and a cool setup to have a cop foster this son, and then he doesn't want to send his son to jail. he's also looking at him. And I would say, I don't know, and this is just my personal opinion. Can you teach a sociopath to only use his powers against bad people? I don't know. I'm sure I've known a couple. I haven't knowingly known any sociopaths. So would that work? I'm not sure. But for the storytelling here, I think it's brilliant, but it does bring up this eternal question of, is he killing just because he loves it, or is there a point to it? And they do go back and forth on that a bit throughout the course of the series.
Speaking of the series, so
yes,
I don't know how you feel about the series, but now keep in mind, I haven't rewatched the series since I originally experienced it. And I mentioned I did watch Resurrection recently. In my memory of the show, and I've kind of said this to folks, is that I always thought that Dexter seasons 1 through 4 was the perfect show. And if it had stopped, it would have probably gone down as one of the greatest series ever of ever. And
yes,
one of the things I also remember about Dexter was I was behind on Breaking Bad, caught up to Breaking Bad. I remember watching the end of Breaking Bad, kind of lined up with the end of Dexter. I think they were both showing. As a matter of fact, like I'd watched Dexter, I think at like 9, and then Breaking Bad was on at 10.
yes,
And
that sounds about right.
And I remember thinking to myself, Breaking Bad is probably one of the greatest written shows of all time.
Sure.
And by the time you got to Hannah McKay and all that kind of stuff at the end, you're like, it almost got frustrating to like have to sit through that and then watch Breaking Bad, because Breaking Bad made the end of Dexter feel even worse than it was, because you had such a amazing thing to immediately compare it against in terms of the storytelling structure. I remember being very frustrated by that.
No, I look, a lot of divisiveness post season 4. Of course, just for the record, in TV, long-running TV shows, there's some changes that happen sometimes. And original series creator Clyde Phillips did leave after season 4. Went in a different direction. You watched Resurrection, I will say, just since you might not remember especially the last couple of seasons that were not your favorite, they did away with a lot of the stuff that was written in at the end. There are characters that they've kind of deleted as they reset the Resurrection universe. First of all, of course, fully agree. Those first 4 seasons of original Dexter, of course, season 4 is the big John Lithgow season, which changes a lot of pieces on the board, is one of the great seasons of television. We're doing a rewatch right now in between, and while we're waiting for Resurrection, my wife and I on our feed are deep into the latter half of season 2 of original Dexter. The thing is, you also start losing some characters who through the first 4 seasons were great. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, but it's always, Jeff, it's funny when you're covering a show that's like 20 years old, you don't want to spoil it because there's always new listeners, but at the same time, you're like, do I do a spoiler warning for like 2006?
I don't think there would be an expectation right now for someone to go watch The Sixth Sense and not know the spoiler of The Sixth Sense. Right? I think there's a point where you have to understand that it just becomes part of culture, right? I mean, it's a thing,
It's in the zeitgeist.
My wife was, just recently watched Game of Thrones straight through for the first time.
Ooh, first time.
She wasn't really into it, but then became obsessed with it. So all of a sudden she's like, oh, that's what that meme of Kit Harington lying on the ground, so all these memes start to come into, start to make
start
sense.
Making sense to her. Yeah.
Everything. It's like, I always tell everyone, you got to go see if you haven't seen the original Godfather movie, you have to watch it. Otherwise, you don't even know half the things you're missing.
Like in general, right? In anything that you're watching.
And from anything. Stuart Little.
You're right. I'm thinking, the first thing that just came to my mind was, I'm sure in The Simpsons, there's something with a head cut off in a bed. That's the Godfather,
everything.
right?
There's almost.
And comic. That's fascinating. You just made me realize how much The Godfather, a serious movie, has lent itself to so many comedies as well, with scenes like that.
Yeah, everything
dark comedy, but
so much references it. So So at some point you're like, all right, Rosebud was a sled. Oh, sorry. Sorry to ruin it for you. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to there's certain things we can hit the broad strokes, so for those that may have forgotten. But
for sure. Oh, I have to ask you about your wife with Game of Thrones. Since she did a condensed watch years later, what did she think of that final episode, final season?
She did not like it. King's Landing.
Okay. It didn't get better with age.
No, because it's funny. As I rewatched it I didn't fully rewatch it with her, but I would come
Well,
in
side watching.
like I made sure I was there during the red wedding, to comfort her and things like that.
Did she know? Were you popping up every time a bad scene was going to happen?
No, I watched a bunch. I watched a bunch with her. It was fun to kind of relive some of that, and then
For sure.
and rewatching it, especially when it's so compact when you like that, is you start to see like, oh, they really did take her care. Like there was no reason for her to destroy King's Landing. There was nothing that led to that. You know what I mean? It
Just
is
bizarre.
interesting. I did see a video that said, well, they strayed away from the books. And it was like, the person was showing like, look, every one of the moments you love the most wasn't in the book. Okay? Along the entire way. And so it's like, but no, she didn't, it didn't hold up from a story structure point of view. I mean, that's the real test, right? If someone watches it compact like that and they're like, just get over yourselves, because there's a difference, right, between putting the 9-10 years or whatever the hell it was in, and then being able to watch it in like 6 months or whatever condensed. It's like, if it doesn't hold up like that, then
then it won't hold up. Yeah, and it's also, not to knock George R.R. Martin, but when the guy who's creating it sort of seems to lose interest in what he's writing, I always feel like that is a sign to the fans. Like, should you be as invested? It reminds me of sports when you hit the age where you're like, this guy doesn't really care about winning. This guy doesn't care about playing.
I saw an interesting, I wish I could remember his name. I think his name was Jack also. And he does a lot of commentary on TikTok and, stuff. And he was talking about that. And his point of view of it was that he had built something too large that he couldn't do it anymore. Like it was just, like the problem with like the end of Game of Thrones, when you start to watch it, it'd be like, right there in King's Landing and they're like, oh no, we have to let this person know, send a raven. And then 5 minutes later, someone's like, we just got a raven. like suddenly 100 million miles is like 5 seconds. Or like they go to leave for Westeros or whatever, and they're there in 7 minutes. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Or like even the big scene where like they're all about to die from the White Walkers when they're across the wall.
Yeah,
and somehow Daenerys makes it there in time.
Magic.
You know what I mean? It's like, so they start playing with like time
and physics.
In such a weird way. And but he was like, but that's what happens. Like all of a sudden you have all these people in all these different places. How do you even get them where they're supposed to be? His take on it was it became too massive of an undertaking to finish it. So anyway,
it makes, and I mean that makes sense. That happens to these sprawling stories. And I will say, to bring it back to Dexter for a second off of that, because I find it so interesting that these beloved shows, I mean, you bring up Game of Thrones. These are two shows that first, Game of Thrones might be a little different. It's a little shorter run, but first 3 or 4 seasons, let's say, right, are beloved before things start changing, let's say. What I find really interesting about what they did with Dexter is it was very quiet. And, when Resurrection came out, and even when New Blood came out as well, which was the in-between series, which was essentially, I always try to explain this to people because New Blood has 1 season, but it's really Dexter season 9, if you kind of were to watch it in order. And also I just feel important to say for anyone watching Dexter for the first time, don't watch it in what you perceive to be real chronological order. Watch it in release order because they give away too much, in the prequel series and everything. But anyway, I just wanted to say, I find it interesting, and this is a streaming TV era thing where a show can leave, come back in a different form a few years later, and, Clyde Phillips back in it, Marcos Siega, who I've met, he's an executive producer and main director for Resurrection now. To see what they kept and what they got rid of to keep the show moving forward, it just seemed really clean the way they did it. There's so many, the writer who, I'm going to mention him because he's redeemed himself. Scott Buck was the writer for the finale of Dexter, who really got raked on, I don't know, Reddit or whatever, with message boards, pre-Reddit back in the day. He really got raked over the coals. And look, if people don't know, I'm sure most of your listeners know, but it's a team effort, and someone always gets tagged with the title, as the credit. And Scott Buck still works on Dexter. He's wrote episodes on Resurrection, and he's a great part of the team. And I'm really glad that a guy like him got to kind of fix the rep for Dexter. And look, it's not like the end of the original Dexter's unwatchable. It moved into space that deviated far from where we were with Dexter earlier on. I think the diplomatic way to say it.
Just didn't feel like the ending anyone would. He definitely didn't want that ending. So
No.
Michael C. I mean, Dexter himself, right?
Yes.
But like, do you think if they had nailed that ending, there would have been no other series?
I think there always would have been some room, but it's interesting. I don't think they could have nailed the ending because the show, seasons 5, 6, 7, 8, we get into a very different Dexter and it becomes a lot more soap opera-ish to me because it becomes Dexter who's the girl of the season. He's got a lady of the season and it can be fun and some of those characters are great, but and this is I'm not quoting anything I've heard from anyone at Dexter, but just in my own view, looking at something, if a show comes back and they pretty much only use characters from seasons X to, Y, I don't know, it gives you an idea of what they might think of the latter half of the seasons.
I'm sure there were moments. I mean, I'm not saying like, I don't remember not liking Lumen or anything like that. And it's like, I think it was just structurally, it's like, I think the problem is sometimes if they don't know where a show is going,
yes,
then, which kind of maybe it was also with Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin could have at least sat down and go, here's what I think should happen. You guys,
here's the outline.
But I mean, Bran, come on. The most boring character on the show.
They could write him out if they redo Game of Thrones.
I mean,
a very anticlimactic throne successor.
It seemed like towards the end they probably just did. I mean, the only way to really end it was how they ended. Probably original. What was the original Sin? Was that the first one
in Dexter original or the prequel?
Original New Blood. New Blood.
Oh, in New Blood,
him dying, right? I mean, which he didn't die.
Which was so interesting. I remember watching that with my wife, and we were excited. Hey, Dexter's back! I love New Blood until the final scene. I remember at the time, and I've said this to everybody who works on Dexter, and I mean, look, the show's back on, so someone agreed. I feel like that was more of like a political statement, honestly, at that time of like, well, we can't let this vigilante serial, everyone wants to see him die. And it was like, no, nobody wanted to see him die. I think people who don't love the show were like, oh, that's good. That Dexter character got killed. That's great. I don't believe that people who watched the show and were invested in Dexter were like, yeah, no, this is exactly how we always anticipated it. And oh, I'm glad they brought him back to end it this way.
Well, with Sopranos, I mean, we learned to love the bad guy or
Sure.
the one who is questionable. It made who we can root for very different.
Which final scene do you like better? The final, without you don't have to say what they are, but the people know. Final scene of Dexter or final scene of The Sopranos?
I'm in the camp where I think the final scene of Sopranos is amazing.
So my dad, he's doing great. He's 91 years old. He lives down in Florida. He just rewatched all of The Sopranos because I suggested to him, hey, Dad, you might not remember a show you watched once 25 years ago. He watched the whole thing and he hated the ending. I tried, I put on my film school hat a little bit and I said, well, Dad, the idea is that you never know when things are going to happen. You never know. Everything could be fine. Lights could be out. And he was like, no, I wanted a definitive ending. And I feel like, I don't know that is something, I get why people want a definitive ending, but I sometimes think the best and most creative choice is to leave it open.
I agree. I mean, it's like the thing I hate most about shows, like take Ted Lasso season 3. Oh, and then they come back with a 4, but they're like, oh, we got to wrap everything up. Well, life doesn't wrap up. I mean, everyone doesn't have an end story at the same time.
Right.
It's like, I mean, that's
I love that point.
Life. So to me, the idea is Sopranos just proves you can't have it either way. You can't have it ambiguous and you can't have it specific. Right. Right.
Right.
Because the beautiful thing about The Sopranos is it ends exactly however you wanted it to end. The reality is whatever happened, that wasn't the ending anyway, because there still would have been something. It was just the ending of our experience being able to watch these people's lives.
Yes.
And that was it. And for it to just end was perfect. Did he die? Did he not die? I don't know. We don't know. It doesn't matter.
The story either ended or it kept going, but that's our out point right there.
Right. That I think David Chase made It was brilliant and like, but always the end of St. Elsewhere where it's a snow globe. I mean, there's always like bold choices where it's like, okay, and
It's
but then
funny you
you
say
have
that.
then you
I
have
was
the
just,
end of
yep.
the Newhart show,
Yes.
which is
And
considered probably the greatest ending of any show ever, right?
And
And
see,
like,
it's so interesting because people are so divided too on a it was all a dream scenario at the end of a show. Sometimes it works, and sometimes people are like, what the F is that? Like, why, what do you mean it was all a dream?
I mean, that was just brilliant. I mean, but that was like what
Phenomenal.
that was a brilliant way to do it. You're right. The Bobby Ewing dream wash out the sea, like when done wrong, but with Bob Newhart, there was just that opportunity
It's just
to do
perfect.
it. If he had woken up and it wasn't Susan Flechette, it was just some random person, that would have been
Doesn't
the
make
worst
sense.
ending of all time.
Yes,
But it was almost more like a goodbye to the fans of all his fans. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
it was yeah, to me that was amazing. But
Just to bring up one other HBO show in that same ilk, because it's a Michael C. Hall show. Did you ever watch 6 Feet Under?
it was funny. I started watching it.
Okay.
He was so Dexter in my head, it was hard for me to watch the show.
So you
I
started watching after he was Dexter, obviously,
Yeah,
then.
yeah, yeah. So it was like I could tell it was good, and it wasn't like it was just one of those things where it was so deep. I think
Yes,
sometimes you watch stuff, and then if you get distracted, you don't go back. It
of
wasn't because it was
course.
bad or anything,
No, it was
but
very
yeah,
heavy, though.
it was funny. But I was just like, I can't buy Dexter as this person.
It's interesting. I've not tried. I mean, I've rewatched a couple of episodes, and look, Michael C. Hall's a phenomenal actor. I mean, there's a reason the guy has the range to play the MC in Cabaret on Broadway, amongst many other things. So on 6 Feet Under, taking a look back, getting to see his range says a lot about what he's bringing to Dexter now, because what I find so interesting is Dexter, he's basically playing his real age, just how it worked out for him. I think he's about 35 when the show starts. Now we have in Resurrection, he's in his 50s and he's dealing with, he doesn't move, he's lost half a step at this point. And, he has to use his brains a little bit more. He's always used his brains, but he kind of has to think a little bit ahead. And looking back at his character in 6 Feet Under, it's all very cerebral. He's a very cerebral actor. He's a big facial actor. And I was also mentioning 6 Feet Under because I was just going to bring it back to what you were talking about, the end of TV series. And the end of that series is very interesting. I'm not spoiling it for anyone, but that even shows you just how the years will keep going on after you leave the characters. That's where that show ends. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But I find it's leaving things open, and I don't know, and I don't know, I'd love to get your take on this. What do you think about leaving a show like this open versus a closed ending? And I don't know if you consider Game of Thrones a fully closed ending or not, but just going back to that since we were talking about it.
I mean, I think Game of Thrones isn't a closed ending because
Right.
you could
There's a
come
million
back to
more
that.
stories.
You could come back to that whole world. I'm a big fan of you don't have to show and tell everything.
Right. You're
Um,
saying leave a little bit to the imagination?
leave a lot. I mean, it's like that's why I don't like any of the Star Wars prequels. Most of them. Like there's something about hearing about something
Mm-hmm.
where it's in your like the Kessel Run and then seeing it. You're never gonna I call those finding the abandoned home movies.
Ooh, I
They
like that.
never live up to the hype and memory and mythology that your family or the conversations or anything put on them. So when you show it, it can't not be a disappointment.
No, it's such a good point. I'm just thinking about like 80s movies that in my head, growing up, seeing on HBO or VHS that we had, and just picturing like, oh man, that's like an epic movie. That must be like 3 hours long. You go back and you watch it as an adult, it's like an hour and 25 minutes and it looks janky and the effects are bad. And you're like, oh, I sort of preferred my like headcanon memory of this more than the actual movie.
We had something in our house picture,
Mm.
and the family lore was this is worth tens of thousands of dollars. It's a art piece and blah blah blah, and that sat for decades.
It had to. You had to. It was
And
collecting wealth.
and the family, and that was the mythology of this painting that my grandma got from a museum or something like that.
Okay.
Well, fast forward to Antique Roadshow, it was maybe worth $500. You know what I mean? I was like, it's like keep the frame. That's what's really expensive here. So it's like sometimes it's just better not to know. You know what I mean? It's just
Just leave it up. Let the
my
mystery
life was
be.
much better with the old version. You know what I mean? It's like
This heirloom could have stayed as an heirloom forever.
it's funny we say all this, but then we both kind of said early on and both agreed that Original Sin, young Dexter,
Yes.
was great.
Absolutely. I do. So, and for that, I think that what I loved about Original Sin, and I want to give some praise to that because it's a really fantastic show. James Remar, who plays Dexter's father in the regular show, was cast as Christian Slater in the prequel series, which is really fun. I mean, it was a great. Patrick Dempsey's in this. It was a great cast. All of the people, Molly Elizabeth Brown, who they cast as young Deb,
Christian
did a fantastic
Slater.
job. It was great. But I'm sorry, you brought us back to Original Sin.
I was saying like that was an example of something that was a prequel that was
yes.
great.
So I think part of the reason the prequel hit so well is it was most of the original team from Dexter was back retelling a story. They had the entire series to go back and look at. They had a really great idea. The idea was they were going to run this prequel series alongside Resurrection, where we'd basically be getting filled in on the background of Dexter from years ago while we're moving forward with present day Dexter. That didn't work out, but that was the idea. They really it was a retelling of season 1, Dexter OG, but they added a lot to it and they gave you a little bit more. Again, I think this is the second time I'm mentioning Reddit. When you get in, it's hard when when you cover a TV show, it is hard not to look at subreddits and everything, and you see people dissing things and, oh, this is retconned. And I had said this to so many people when they were getting angry at retconning. I was like, look, no one knew in 2007 that in 20 years they were going to have a chance to make a sequel show. I don't think any creator, especially if they weren't directly involved by the end, would you have to be stuck with every decision someone else made? I think sometimes in this day and age, you got to trim the fat. And I think it's fascinating as a elder millennial who grew up with VHS and, then moved to DVR and DVD. People didn't rewatch stuff the way that they rewatch stuff now. I don't think, it's like when you see a mistake if you watch Cheers, and there's some like weird random take that definitely should have been cut. Yeah, they didn't cut it because they had 25 minutes, 26 minutes back then. And yeah, it's in there. Who cares? No one's going to see it again.
100%. And I think I agree with you. And it's like, it's funny because like we would watch Friends. My wife, we've probably seen the entire series end to end now.
Oh, we have
50,
loads
50
of
million
series
times,
that
50 million times.
It's on a loop, right?
Yeah, it's on a loop. And
Pivot.
But you start to see things that the inconsistencies pop out and the things that really don't make sense. And clearly they were on a break, all those things. But with Original Sin, I also think my other prequel rule, which can make a prequel successful, is if people didn't give a shit about it, then you have an opportunity to wow them with it. It's how vested are you in the past to stay away from it, the more vested you are, because that's where the disappointment comes. I think the best example of any of that is nobody ever gave 2 seconds of thought to the people that stole the battle plans to destroy the Death Star. It was 1 second in a scroll of a movie that nobody it was like, okay, but Rogue One becomes like one of the best Star Wars movies ever. Andor becomes one of the best TV shows because nobody really was vested in it. You can't think of anything where you're like, these were all the stories that I know happened during this time. Nothing.
Right.
The plans. That was it. You know nothing else.
So there's a lot of room to fill in, is what you're saying.
There's no room for disappointment because it is just a story. The problem is like when you get like, you have to be, C-3PO was built by Anakin. Was it? Oh, the stormtroopers are clones of Boba Fett. Or Jango Fett, and like, it's like we have to force things together and do things. It's like that were never meant to be. That's I think when you start to get into the thing. Well, we got some good tangents. So I'll ask you a few. So what do we cover? The Dark Passenger. That's podcast. So we talked about Dakota Harry. We talked a little bit about Born in Blood. all that. And then I did
Yes.
have, let me see, I had written down Dexter questions, rapid fire Dexter.
Oh, all right.
All right. Best kill of the series.
Best kill of the series. So now of all the series or of Dexter
I'm gonna let
OG?
I'm not gonna
You know
swing.
what? I will take. Okay, this is. I have two. I'm just going to say from the first season. There's a character named Little Chino. Is named Little Chino because the actor's about 6'8". He played for the New York Jets in the NFL. He's a fun actor, but there's a moment in that where Dexter finds out, oh, when I'm working on a giant human being, I can't use the same amount of paralytic. It's just not going to work. And we had a gigantic guy getting off of Dexter's kill table and running away naked with a needle sticking out of his neck. That was a really fun one. But then I do have to, just for posterity's sake, don't want to spoil this. Some people haven't seen this, but there are two kills at the end of Resurrection Season 1 that really stand out in the pantheon of the Dexter kill sphere.
There was some really good ones in that series. Best one-liner.
Ooh, best one liner. Okay, I know this is a clean show, so I'm going to keep this clean. The best one liner is really from one James Dokes, who is one of the original. He's a Miami Metro guy who is the only one who looks at Dexter and says, this guy's a serial killer. There's a famous line from him, which is just, surprise, MFer.
You can't convince me that Dokes isn't the Bay Harbor Butcher. Anyway, but that's a different podcast. Most underrated character on Dexter.
Most underrated character on Dexter, I am going to go with, you know what? I'm going to go with, this is one that might be controversial. I think Keith Carradine's Detective Frank Lundy is extremely underrated. We're in the midst of covering his season, his first season right now, season 2 of the original show. He is such a phenomenal class actor. How he works with Jennifer Carpenter, phenomenal. So I would say Lundy is a under the radar guy.
That's a good pick.
Thank you.
They tried to make him a thing. They brought him back.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. Um,
We did have a
villain,
whole, sorry, we did have a whole discussion. We've been trying to figure out because we always get a question of, is Dexter autistic? Jeff Lindsay, the writer, says no. Clyde Phillips says no. I say, maybe. So we always find that interesting because his interplay with people is so off a lot of the time. But sorry, go.
No, you're good. You're good. Villain, you wish had gotten more time.
Ooh, villain. Okay. I would say off the top of my head, there's a character, and this guy's just slimy, and it's sort of a random one to pick. In season 2, there's an actor, I'm blanking on the actor's name. He's a well-known character actor. You've seen him a million times. Plays this guy named Roger, who's a sleazy car salesman. Dexter isn't going to kill him. He's just trying to unload his car, but the guy's so grotesque and you know, going after women who are in bad marriages and everything, that Dexter's like, oh God, I can't help it. I gotta kill this effing guy. I would have liked to have seen more with him because I think that there was a lot, I think that could have led Dexter to a lot more. Do I have more? Of course, you know, I'm trying to give you more fun answers than I would have liked more Peter Dinklage. You know, it's...
You can never have enough Peter Dinklage. So that would be the obvious answer. Would Dexter's code survive in the real world?
Well, let's see. I would say in 2026, Dexter's Code has a good chance of surviving in the real world.
Probably. Yeah, he probably.
I think that
probably wouldn't even need lawyers now.
No, he'd be fine. He'd be a cult hero.
Do you think he should have gotten caught ever?
In the series?
Yeah. Do you think it's like, come on?
I think so. So the issue that they run into with him not getting caught is Miami Metro ends up looking super incompetent a lot of the time. And some people are like, why? And I'm like, what do you mean, why? There's different divisions. There's big cities. I've explained to people too, I think not knowing the geography sometimes of things, I'm a big geography nerd, and so I understand, and I spent a lot of time in Florida. Miami's a sprawling city, you know, it makes perfect sense for a serial killer to thrive in a place like that.
All right. And then one word for the finale.
Okay, for the original
Original
finale?
finale, yeah.
Oh, the original finale. One, okay, I could give you a sentence, but
I'll take a sentence.
here,
I don't mean like
oh, no, I'll give you
duplicit. Yeah, yeah.
my one word would be really, and my my sentence would be like, "Are you kidding me?" I right now I can see it in my head right now. Michael C. Hall with not the best fake red beard, driving a logger truck in Oregon.
Uh, His code was like, did that redwood deserve it? Yeah, that's why it was so unsatisfying, the ending. So, Jack, thank you so much for hanging out with me. This was so fun.
Jeff, I had an amazing time. Thank you so much for chatting with me for so long. It was an awesome time.
Plug the podcast one more time. I'll let you do it.
Thank you very much.
And then we'll just watch those numbers spike. No.
Oh, that's the idea, isn't it? Everybody, if you'd like to hear me and Diana talk about Dexter from related topics and some personal stuff, you can go follow us at Dark Passengers, a Dexter podcast. Also on Instagram at Dark Passengers Pod, and all of our other stuff and Patreon and all that good stuff is always in our show notes.
Amazing. Thank you, sir.
Of course. Thank you, Jeff. I hope we'll have a chance to chat again down the line.
I would love that.